So in the middle length Lamrim, this first section is called training in faith, and or confidence is another English word that is a good translation of what faith means, because faith in our cultural tradition often means accepting something as true for which there is no evidence, kind of the idea of blind faith. And that's not a concept that you find in Buddhism. You only find, which day? So I'm going to essentially start now with day 30. Day 33, day 34, kind of around there. So this section that we're talking about, training the mind, properly relating to the guru in our mind or in thought, in middle length Lamrim is called training in faith, and it is confidence that our teacher is a Buddha. That's the kind of confidence, that's the kind of faith that we're generating. And there's a variety of different scriptural supports and different ways that is presented in, and as we'll see. But when they say in the middle length Lama, when they say faith, which again I don't think Lama Zopa or Lama Yeshe uses specifically the word faith here, but that's what we are doing. We are developing confidence in our ability to see the Guru as Buddha. And we touched upon this once or twice. This first contemplation on day 33, we regard our Guru as a Buddha for our own sake, for our own mental development. He says, training our mind in devotion to the Guru means using quotations and logical reasoning to prove the mind that does not see the Guru as a Buddha, to prove to the mind that does not see the Guru as a Buddha that the Guru is a Buddha. So to argue, Venerable Rubina often uses, the phrase arguing against kind of the wrong view or the delusions, the afflictions, because those are highly operative in our mind. Self-cherishing, self-grasping, self-centeredness, anger, all of these states of mind that are not productive, not useful, that are obstacles. She often will say that our job is to argue against them, to present valid reasoning, to present, a better way of, thinking or perceiving that counters or argues against. And Lama Zopa here is saying the same thing, that we focus on these scriptural citations, these logical reasonings that will help us to be able to see the Guru as Buddha, unlike our ordinary mind, which just sees all sentient beings, all humans as ordinary. And then he says that the purpose of, because again, it's for one's own benefit, so he puts it in the context of our desire to lead all sentient beings to enlightenment, which is dependent upon our own achieving of enlightenment, which is dependent upon someone showing us the path to enlightenment. Here he calls, you know, the blessings of the guru, and really, you know, the real blessings of the guru are the fruits of our practice that come from following the guru's advice, that come from seeking the guru's advice and following the guru's advice. Then we get the realizations of the path in our mental continuum, and that's really then the delusions reduce and are ultimately eliminated. Our good qualities increase, and ultimately that results in the complete flourishing of our potential, the state of enlightenment. And that process really is the real blessings of the guru. But for that process to unfold, the quickest, most bulletproof way possible depends upon our ability to view the advice that we're receiving as being completely free of fault, you know, as completely stainless, you know, as if we were getting advice from Shakyamuni Buddha himself. I mean, if we knew that Shakyamuni Buddha was in the world and we knew exactly what that meant and what he was capable of, and you know, and it was actually a person that we could go and visit, then the way that we would relate to everything that we were being told and the advice that we were being given would be completely, we would have no doubt in our mind. There would be no question that if this practice is what was recommended, or this, you know, advice to abandon this activity is what was, then because we had such a clear understanding of that person's capacity, their knowledge, their skill, we would just simply devote ourselves to following that path, to following that advice. But our minds don't really see the world like that. We just kind of see the world as like, well, everybody, you know, everybody in the world makes mistakes. Everybody in the world gets things wrong sometimes. So, you know, if I agree with it, if it makes, you know, of course, we need to check the teachings that we're being given and make sure that they do accord with ethics and the, you know, the four seals and everything that, and if not, we need to really interrogate why we think there is a disconnect. So we don't just stop thinking, we don't stop, you know, analyzing and reflecting. But if we can try to develop that way of seeing our own teacher, then we'll have exactly that same fire in our own mind, that same drive, that same determination that we would have if someone that we knew from, you know, the historical record, from countless people's personal accounts, you know, was actually fully qualified, just, you know, in the same way that the Buddha is. So cultivating that is what will speed us along, and not cultivating that is what will, you know, doubts will arise, will be wishy-washy about things. We won't have that same intensity, that same drive, that same determination. And so the results, you know, that we get out of that practice will also therefore be limited. So then he talks about the importance of, and again, this applies to any realization. In the Lamrim, they talk about how all of the realizations deepen over time. They initially they become, or initially they are very surface level, and we can be easily swayed, um, either by other people or by our own habits, our own past tendencies, our own design, our own preferences for, uh, not seeing things that way. For example, with death and impermanence, as just one example of Lamrim realizations. Intellectually, we know that our life is going to come to an end, but we're generally really poor at acting in every moment, in every day, from a place that is informed by that knowledge. We get caught up, we don't really want to think about it. We get caught up in sensory enjoyments. We are a little bit maybe fearful or uncertain about what that will be like, when it happens. And so we don't embody that wisdom. And so it isn't that we say that it's not true, or it isn't that we would believe other people if they said it wasn't true, but our own preference to not think about it, to not internalize it, that's a deeper tendency in the mind. That's a more familiar track in the mind. It's a deeper groove that we've worn into the mind. So it's easier to slip into that groove than it is to stay out, or to create a different groove that we can slip into and stay in. So that's why if we only meditate on death and impermanence occasionally, then that our own mental habit will prevent it from really being a really forceful realization. And here, the example is, if our guru devotion is not firmly established, and not stable, then we will go back, we'll fall back into that, again, our own mental habit of feeling like, and this is also we have to kind of think about how much we've internalized about, culturally speaking, in terms of, this idea that we need to, that religion is sort of a way of controlling people, that, we shouldn't give authority to, to clergy, not that our guru is necessarily a monk or a nun, they could be a layperson, but like just the skepticism that exists in our culture about following someone in this way, because we're like, well, they know, maybe they've studied more, but like their mind is the same as my mind, and so they can help me somewhat, but they're not infallible. This idea that we reserve infallibility for some sort of, either we just say it doesn't exist, or maybe we reserve it for a being that's not part of the world. And so that's a very limiting. Then what Lama Zopa is saying is that when we observe the guru, we'll see faults in the guru, we'll see mistakes, and that will, if we see them, that will just reinforce the mind that is determined to see every sentient being as just like me, as ordinary, as, nothing special. And so, and again, that will cut us off from being able to train the mind in faith in this way. But then he says, if our devotion is established through wisdom, even even if in our view there appear to be faults in the actions of the guru, we won't believe it is the reality. Because of our stable devotion, the appearance of faults won't affect our mind or cause us to lose our devotion. And then, of course, he says, along with recognizing all sentient beings as our mother, seeing the guru as a Buddha is one of the most difficult realizations to generate. But then he says, even though it is very difficult, if we don't attempt to realize this, we can't generate the rest of the path to enlightenment. So, and that's a difficult, that's a difficult idea to accept, because, I think we can see the logic of, well, maybe there's power behind that. Maybe it's, there's good reason. But he says, we can't generate the rest of the path to enlightenment. Not, well, we're making it a little bit more difficult for ourselves, or, we're maybe making it take longer. That's a different argument. He's making the argument that if we can't see the Guru as Buddha, we won't ever generate the realizations of the Lamrim, not just that we have to try harder or take more time. So that's a really difficult idea. Does anyone have any thoughts or questions or reflections? Yep, Eric.
Kodo was asking, what day in the Lamrim Year or page is the path book? Is this?
Yeah, so we're on my Kindle. I don't have pages, but it's like day 33, day 34.
And I actually had another question. My question was, is the guru then like the only way to teach, or rather teaching us this kind of like non-dual knowledge? Or is it he's drawing that out from us then? Is that what it means by we can't achieve enlightenment without him or her?
Well, I mean, it isn't just that we need a guru, but it is that if we don't see the guru as Buddha, then we won't. And I think that, I mean, I don't know that it's explained. I don't know that there is a specific reason. In general, Lama Zopa and Lama Yeshe, they talk about how that, again, I mean, we've talked about some of the logic behind it, but they talk about how it makes the mind, it prepares the mind by that the having that kind of confidence in the mind sets the stage in the mind for obtaining realizations. And again, all I can kind of say is that, the things that I did, that we've covered about how hearing it from a Buddha, hearing advice, is something that we hear in a way that can only be like that. Because we're separating this person from everyone else that we know. We're saying, well, sure, everybody else is ordinary, and they make mistakes and so on, but this is a Buddha and they don't make mistakes. And so everything that we hear about, because they're also what they're teaching us Lamrim. They're not just, we're not just relying on, because when we're talking about Lamrim realizations, that's most of our interactions with that person is, how my meditation on this topic went like this. What does that, what feedback do you have for me based on what I'm telling you about how this is going for me? Like, or when they tell you to do the visualization like this, or this is the meaning, this is how you should understand this, you know. So we're also hearing not just what sounds like specific practice advice, like go meditate on this, but then everything that we know about how to do that is also what they've taught us. So we have complete confidence that we're doing it right, that that this is actually that I'm doing everything I'm supposed to be doing. I understand everything, because we're going back and forth. The Other than thinking about it in terms of how we would internalize advice, there could be other aspects to it that are more esoteric, or that operate on maybe a subtler level of the mind, a deeper level of the mind that's not that kind of really coarse conscious. But I don't specifically know how to elucidate anything other than thinking about it in that way. Any other thoughts or questions? So then if we look at days 34, 35, what Lama Zopa is saying there is, again, coming at this from just a slightly different angle, where he says that our practice of Guru devotion is the source of all the progress and all of the problems. So by that, he means the benefits and the disadvantages. That if if it goes well, then it's the source of our progress. If it's going poorly, then it's going to be the source of our problems. Yeah, he says in this and in this life and from life to life. But then he points out, of course, just like, because Buddhism doesn't assume that there is an a priori purpose to life. That Buddhism doesn't assert that the universe was set up for people to achieve enlightenment, that someone like made things work out in a certain way and was like, planting knowledge and various so that people would discover it. And um, that's not the Buddhist view. The Buddhist view is that there's simply kind of the natural world, and the natural world is populated in different ways by different kinds of ordinary sentient beings, and the natural world permits consciousness to, because consciousness is a causal phenomenon, um, and it can be intentionally cultivated, that the natural world permits a state that we call enlightenment that's characterized in a certain way, and it, but barring that, its default is just another state that we call ordinary existence. And so no one is requiring us to practice any of the contemplations in the Lamrim. We have to choose for ourselves that enlightenment seems like a better option than being ordinary, and we have to have training. Another kind of confidence to train in is the confidence that, you know, it is possible, and that the stages of the path do reliably culminate in enlightenment, which means that we develop confidence in the Four Noble Truths. You know, the idea that it, you know, the fact that ordinary cyclic existence is not causeless, that we understand the causes and conditions that give rise to it, that there are effective antidotes or other causes and conditions that we can establish in the mind, to move from a state of being ordinary to a state of being enlightened, and that's a reliable and repeatable process that is laid down in the Buddha's teachings. That's another kind of faith or confidence that we need in order to engage in the stages of the path. But, you know, most sentient beings are not engaging in something like that. It's sort of like deciding that you're going to learn how to play chess or the violin. Those are things that exist in the world, that are options that are open, but you can decide to do them or not to do them. So he says, you know, we are free to choose. We have to use our own wisdom to choose whether or not we practice Guru devotion. If we don't concentrate on Guru devotion, we've missed the most important preparation for all our future lives. If we don't understand this point well or don't concentrate on it, we experience the greatest loss. Each of us has the answer to achieving success in all our future lives. It's in our hands, is what Lama Zopa says. So, you know, there's no one that's gonna, you know, knock on the door at 6 o'clock in the morning and say, okay, you know, time to practice Guru devotion, time to, you know, this is how society is. You know, there's nothing that's going to come from the outside that's going to guide us. We have to really think about the advantages and the disadvantages, and see how it is the root of the path, as Lama Tsongkhapa says. And so, if we've decided that the end result of the path is our goal, then this is the vehicle for getting to that end result of the path. And then he says on day 35 that pure appearance, which again is talking about seeing the Guru as Buddha, doesn't come from the side of the object. It has to come from our side, from our own mind. So this is kind of in a way, thinking about when we romanticize what the guru should look like, and we think that guru devotion, that the guru should be showing exactly like what we read about that like Shakyamuni Buddha showed, and that it would be almost like like the magical feats, and we would have no choice but to see that person as Buddha, because they would be, from their side, they would be sort of just broadcasting all of these extraordinary, unique things. And Lama Zopa is saying that that's not how it works, that we're the ones that have to choose to practice guru devotion. We're the ones that have to train the mind in pure appearance. And then he gives that there's a story, a famous story, where there was a practitioner, a lay practitioner, who there's different versions of this story, or or maybe they're totally different stories, but they just sort of prove the same point. Sometimes it's a story. There's a story about someone who recites a mantra that they were given, and they recite it, with great faith, great devotion in the person who gave it to them, and then later a monk, comes along and observes that person reciting the mantra, and they're like, "No, that's not how it goes. Like you've mispronounced one of the syllables." But then they start doing it that way, and then all of the realizations, the cities that they gained, start to decline, because they didn't, they were just doing it because they're like, oh, that's a monastic who told me, but they don't really know that person. They don't have any faith in them, and they quote unquote corrected what they were doing, but not they lost that mind of devotion because they're not doing what how their teacher gave it to them, and so the benefits of the practice are lost when they change. And so, and the story is different. It's about a relic of the Buddha. Relic means when the Buddha died, his body was cremated. And, we would call it that. It was burned in a pyre, funeral pyre, and there were relics that came, and which is something that has been happening for thousands, ever since the Buddha. When they cremate the bodies of incredibly highly realized beings, they'll find like jewels and different things that come out of the ashes, and those are relics. And so, so there's a story here where this woman really wanted a relic of the Buddha, but they're pretty difficult to find. But someone gave her a dog's tooth and was like, "Here, this is one of the teeth of the Buddha," and so it was part of the Buddha's body, and so she thought she had part of the Buddha's body, and so she prayed to it, and was able to progress, but it actually was just, it wasn't that, but she was able to get the benefits as if she was relating to a real relic because of her mind of unshakable devotion in the person who gave it to her. So what this means is that also that it doesn't matter if the guru is Buddha. What matters is our ability to see the guru as Buddha, and that if we can train the mind to accomplish that, then we will get those same benefits as if it was like that person was, floating in the air and subduing people, through magical feats and like, kind of demonstrating something that just seemed unavoidably Buddha-like. And so, that is easy to do. That would be, if that's what was happening, that would be so easy for us to think about that person that way. But it's very likely that the person that we're relating to is, going to restaurants and eating restaurant food and, talking about the weather and, just kind of doing like, talking about their taxes and, just talking about ordinary things with people with their, and so it's not, it's not going to come from these extraordinary feats that they are doing. Most likely, I mean, sometimes they might show some aspects that are hard to explain, and that's to help our minds, to develop confidence too. But what's important is that what matters is our ability to train our own mind and to keep our minds concentrated on seeing them that way. Because from that, and only from that, will we receive the benefits.
Excuse me, Venerable.
Mm-hmm.
When you talk about the ordinary aspects and seeing the guru as Buddha from your own mind, cultivating that and developing that through your own mind, logically, it's very I understand, and the meditations and the quotations, all of the things that encourage us to develop that are very graspable. There's a sentence here that I just I stumble over. It says, even if evil, looking at that person as Buddha, we practice guru devotion. And I mean, I understand the logical side of that. I just have a really hard time.
Which day is that? Which day is that
I
in?
believe that is 35.
Mm-hmm.
So,
And say the sentence one more time.
pardon me.
Could you repeat the sentence one more time?
Even if evil, looking at that person as a Buddha, we practice guru devotion. Even if our virtuous friend is not a bodhisattva, but just an ordinary person, or even cruel, impatient, or immoral, if we practice guru devotion by looking at that person as a Buddha, as in the story, so forth and so on.
Mm-hmm.
So I just have logically, I get it. I'm just not sure how to make that leap into with using my own wisdom and discernment has to come into play somewhere.
Mm-hmm. So, I think certainly, hopefully, very hopefully, we wouldn't actually be in a situation that was quite as extreme as what's being, trying to relate to someone that the world at large was kind of labeling based on the very obvious known activities as, that isn't and that's a cruel person, or that's an immoral. Because again, if we look back on the qualities of a teacher, that's kind of our roadmap. That's how we're supposed to, we're supposed to kind of constrain ourselves to finding a teacher that meets those 10, all of those things, that check all of those boxes. So it would certainly be much more difficult in a situation, but in a way, it's kind of where in day 37, where he's giving us one of the first practical methods, which is focusing strongly on the good qualities of the guru, naturally overwhelms the wrong conception that sees faults in the guru. So we are going to have to contend with the fact that and this is something, it's not just today, we're going to be talking about different parts of this for several more classes, and then we'll be bringing in additional things that I think, might help to some degree. But, we do have to contend with the fact that it is almost certainly the case that our guru is going to show, broadly speaking, ordinary aspect, which means that that we will observe, maybe some short-temperedness every once in a while, that we'll observe, what seems like maybe attachment to comfort, or things that that we wouldn't think, that we wouldn't ascribe to our ideal of like a celestial Buddha who's, not sleeping and, just practicing 24/7, 24 hours a day, and only ever reciting mantra. And, we're going to see ordinary aspects, and so that's something that we have to contend with. Do we see those as faults, or do we see those as just a manifestation really of our mind and how we're perceiving the guru? So I think in practice, I think it's made easier by constraining ourselves to the kind of person that checks as many of the boxes as we can of who is a suitable, who is a good teacher. Because this method that I mentioned in day 37, is kind of one of the principal methods where and it's, I think what Lama Zopa is saying is that even if a person is, often really sharp with people, or is often, still they have good qualities. They're not completely bereft of good qualities. Like, even, someone who's doing really terrible things in the world, they probably love their children. They probably love their significant other. They probably are loyal to a close group of friends. And those are admirable traits. The difficulty would be if those are the only admirable traits of a person. You would have to put a lot of effort into concentrating on those and having that overwhelm the harmful things that are also happening. So I think but Lama Zopa is saying that the mind is malleable, the mind is trainable, so it's possible. I don't know that he's saying it's advisable. I don't think he's saying go out and try to find someone who seems cruel, who seems immoral, and try. But he's saying that it's conceivable that if we do if we put these practices into practice, if we take these methods and we concentrate on developing these methods, it is possible, even in that situation, that we could, because the Tibetans, the Tibetans will say that, like, because when the Tibetans were invaded and there was the decimation of their society, that was under Mao Zedong. And kind of that whole insanity that happened. I mean, even the Chinese suffered terribly during that period where they were destroying. They were killing the intellectuals, and they were purging their own society, and it was a horrible time. And the Tibetan, they kind of got wrapped up in that. The Tibetans will say that they look at Mao as like a wrathful aspect of an enlightened being, and thinking of those incredibly harmful actions as like purifying the negativities of the Tibetan people and actually helping them achieve enlightenment. And that's looking at one of the worst dictators and despots in modern history, who's responsible for the deaths of millions of people. But they are able to see that, because they can't. I mean, if they could change it, if they could cause that to be different, then they would have caused that to be different. But if the only thing you can do is change your perception, because it's such a huge cultural thing that it's not going to be different, then there's you can still try to interpret what you're seeing in a way that is supportive of your spiritual practice. And in the same way, we can look at, things that are lesser than that as also being like, well, those were wrathful actions of an enlightened being that maybe I don't fully comprehend, don't make, sense on a conventional level, but there's some karmic benefit that was the cause of why they chose to engage in that. So I think, like I said, I think it becomes much more difficult depending on what you have to work with. So we should really make strong effort to not put ourselves in a difficult situation like that. But yeah, I think I think Lama Zopa is just saying that it can be done, but don't try it. Try to really find someone that makes it a bit easier. That the kinds of things that you're seeing as faults are infinitely less intense, and therefore, making it much, much easier for yourself.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're just a little bit out of time. Is there a final question? Okay, so let's dedicate. So again, recollecting our positive intention and thinking that having participated in the course, we actualized that intention, and that positive energy is something that we have the sense of letting go of, thinking may it ripen in whatever way is truly beneficial for sentient beings. Visualizing strongly that it ripens in extremely vast, beneficial ways. Just going to do that on your own in whatever way feels right for you. All right. Well, I will see everybody on Monday.
Thank you, Venerable. See you then. Take care, everyone.